Hey everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to the final tutorial in this tutorial series about how to get a spaceship on your street. Now, the easy way to do that, of course, is just to have an alien friend, but not everyone is that fortunate. Most of my friends are aliens, but that might not apply to you. So we gotta do that the visual effects route. And this is the place I've left you so far. I am in Blender. I have my ship with all the complicated materials that I've created for it. This is my foreground layer, and in my background layer, I have a ground plane with a shadow for my ship. Now, to see everything just sort of play together, I am going to hit F12 and give a quick render. But before that, I'm going to check that I'm using optics for rendering. I'm not, but now I am, because optics is objectively faster. I'm going to render at 128 samples, and let's go. That's where we're left. It looks pretty cool already. It looks pretty good. We still have a little bit of work to do before we can finish everything and just hit render. And I'm gonna come over to the compositing tab. We've already done this hack for the ship's shadow to appear correctly, and now we're going to focus on the main ship element. Well, the first thing that I noticed here, and I actually thought about coming over here and fixing the light. I don't think it's the best way to go right now. If it's necessary, I'll actually fix the light. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add a saturation node, a hue saturation value node, and I'm gonna place it right before the viewer node. In case you don't know, you just navigate around these nodes the same way you would navigate anything in Blender. Scroll, zooms. If you press the middle mouse button, it slides things around. And also, of course, grab. I can select multiple and rotate. I can scale, all of that stuff. To zoom out on the picture, I press V, or I can just change it over here. Alt V zooms in. And if I have Alt and I click with the middle mouse button, it does this. I can click over here to fit. It's not very intuitive, but you can get used to it. What I'm going to do with this hue saturation value is I'm going to lower the saturation all the way to 0, because that sort of lets me see. You see, I was thinking that the ship was too dark, but if you look at it in black and white, what you'll see is that it's actually, if I just add a brightness, I'm gonna add a curves node, an RGB curves node right over here, and what I'm going to do is just come over here and just ever so slightly darken my ship. I'm just gonna darken it a little bit and just try to make it fit the scene a bit better. I can just hit M to toggle the node on and off, and already we have a much nicer result. The ship feels much more like it's a part of the scene, and if I come over here, you can tell the same. The ship now feels more integrated just because the lighting levels match. What I'm going to do now is duplicate this RGB curves node and place it over here. If you don't remember, Shift D to duplicate and backspace to reset the node. I could do everything in one node, but I kind of want to be able to see every alteration that I do separately. Like I might want to tweak the curves a little bit, just make it a little bit brighter. Yeah, that's a bit better, but not necessarily this one over here, because this one is for my lightness. And this one, if you comment right over here under backdrop channels or on these menus over here and you select R, I am now only seeing the red channel. White means there's a lot of red in this pixel. Black means this pixel doesn't have any red information. And over here, I'm going to work only on the red. And the ship now sort of feels a little bit darker than it should. So I'm going to raise the red values a little bit until it blends. Again, taking that car over here as reference. Might be too much. I'm gonna dial it back just a tad. Hitting M over here, you can just again see the difference. If I come back to over here, color and alpha, or here, that isn't working because I've done this. Okay, that's fine. Let's go to fit. Now the ship looks kind of pink. That's the kind of problem that might happen. I'm not gonna fix that now. I'm gonna fix that later, because now I'm gonna go to the green channel and I'm gonna duplicate this node, reset it again, and use it for the green channel. Now, if I select all of these and hit scale on the Y and 0, they line up, and I like to do that because it gets kind of annoying. It also feels kind of too dark in the green channel, so I'm gonna bump it up a little bit. And coming back to here, now the ship feels a lot more integrated. if I mute these, you'll see that the ship now feels like it belongs there a lot more. I'm just going to do one more. Shift D to duplicate, backspace to reset it, and I did something idiot, so I'm going to reset it again. Scale Y0 just because I want this to be neat, and I'm going to take a look at a blue channel. Because the blue channel was the last one to be touched, it looks the best. I am going to raise the ship just a little bit, and the effect it's going to have is more of, I'm going to dull down all the other transformations just a bit. And I'm comparing it with and without. I don't like it. Get rid of it. Plug this in here. I feel it might be too gray. I'm gonna take a look at it. Might be too gray. I'm gonna come over here, and it's, you see, I am not doing crazy, adjustments like this. It is a very subtle process that we're doing right now. Compositing is a very subtle process. Now I feel it's gone too much in the other direction. And you can also, of course, just use a color corrector node. It looks like this, and you can do basically the same thing, and you have a lot of control. I like to do it this way, but it's not mandatory in any way that you do it this way. Getting this to look a little bit neater. This here is my color adjustment. I'm just adjusting it to look more like, and of course I can always double or triple check my work and see if it's good or not. I might brighten it a little bit. Does it look better? Let me see. Again, it's a back and forth, and that looks okay. I'm aiming, by the way, I'm kind of taking as a reference this side of the car over here against these parts of the ship that aren't very well lit. The light's coming sort of over here. I feel like this part should be lit better. I'm just gonna come over here and change the direction of the light a little bit. And for that, I think it's easier if I come over here to color management and I use a false color view transform. So I'm just gonna rotate my light. This way I can kind of see where the light's pointing at. I'm gonna quickly hide this so that I can see where my light's pointing. Light's coming from this way, and the car would be somewhere here. So yeah, I feel like the light could be more like this. Maybe. This is the moment where you do all the adjustments that you feel are necessary before you commit to a render, because you don't want the lighting in your render to look weird or off. It might be a matter of just adjusting it here, more like this, maybe more pointing down. That feels slightly better, right? I am going to, on the rendering, I'm going to choose a different slot, and I'm going to render again with all my adjustments. I'm going to see how it looks. All right, let's see. Yeah, that doesn't feel right at all. That feels way too dark. But maybe over here in compositing, if I take this out and I hit fit, yeah, that feels, the lighting feels wrong. Again, on layout, it might be easier if I add a UV sphere. Let's kind of place it over here and shade smooth. I know I've done that, but this is a matter of refinement. I'm trying to refine the light as much as I can, and the sphere really helps. Let's place the sphere more over here. You can have a better understanding of what's going on. Gonna turn off visibility in renders for this sphere, and I'm gonna try again. This is a matter of trial and error, and you just gotta keep tweaking things until you're satisfied. Yeah, this looks a bit better in my opinion, but my opinion might be completely wrong. Okay, let me take a look. If I just take this out, I'm gonna take a look at it in false color, just so that I can see. I want this area here to be lit with the same intensity as this area over here, and that's not working. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just gonna try to get that to happen over here. It might be a case of just increasing the lighting a bit. I'm gonna overdo it and then underdo it, because the problem is the tip of the ship is looking okay, but over here it feels like it's not on direct sunlight. So what I'm doing, trying to get that feels about right. Again, I know I did this before in a previous tutorial, but this is a matter of readjusting and tweaking till your heart's content. And my heart isn't content yet, so I'm gonna re-render. Okay, that feels a bit better. I'm going to take a look at it in false color just to be sure. That does feel a little bit better, but it feels like it might be too bright. The direction of the light feels better, but it feels like it might be too bright. I'm gonna take a look at it in compositing and standard. Let me see. I might just lower only over here, just change the way that this is working a bit. Nah, that was dumb. Let me take a look. try to control it a little bit more. Maybe change it to be a bit more like this. I'm trying not to affect the bright parts as much, but get the dark parts to look right. There are some ways to do this that are more precise, but this is what we're going for this tutorial. So here, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to add an overall color correction. I'm not going to use this node because this node is very complicated. I'm just going to add an RGB curves, and I am going to fool around with the contrast a lot to try to get something that looks cool. And I am going to do the old teal and orange thing. I'm just going to skewer the reds like this and mess around with the blues until I get the result that I'm looking for. This is just a very quick color correction. It isn't a very precise color correction. Again, I am not striving for precision over here. I am just trying to get a cool render to show everybody. It helps that I've done that before. Before that, I'm gonna add a hue saturation value node to this, and I am going to bump the saturation. You see, with this color correction, all the grunge and the details that we've added, they really come through, which is nice. And the colors are kind of similar. If I take a look at it in a false color node, the colors are kind of similar. These areas might be a little bit too extremely dark. Coming back to standard, these areas here, they might be a little too dark, so I'm just going to brighten them a touch. Looking at it in false color. What happens if I turn this off? Nah, that has a lot to do with the color that I've chosen. Look at it in standard view. Just trying to fool around with the position of the light. Again, look at it in false color because I feel like over here I should get a little bit more. Again, let me just compare, otherwise I'll try to come back to what I had. And that looks a lot better. Let me take a look at it now with compositing. Let me take a look again with false color. That is still too dark. Take a look over here. If I take this out, how does it change things? It doesn't make a difference. I'm worried about, oh, so that's the saturation. What's happening is basically the lighting does look a little bit better now, but if I take a look over here, like this is pretty well lit and it feels like the light is coming from this direction right over here, which it is, but the problem is that I have too extreme of saturation. So, and this is, take a look at it in standard view, that is still pretty okay, and it doesn't look as strong again. I am going to keep tweaking the light position a little bit. I am rotating it around the y-axis because now I feel like the light might be too strong on, maybe more this way, I guess. Come back to rendering, and on slot 6 I'm going to render again. Alright, now I'm looking at it in false color, comparing with what we had previously. It isn't really a massive difference that we have, but compared to here, for example, it's more around over here. That's okay. Yeah, I think in terms of lighting, this is looking pretty sweet. Now there's one other problem that we need to address. If you compare the ship over here with this crack, you'll notice that the ship is a little bit too sharp. So what I'm going to do here is add a blur node, just a simple blur node, and I'm just going to give it a slight blur on both axes. And as you can see, the ship already blends a lot better in the scene. Because if you look especially over here, nothing else on the ship has this amount of sharp detail, but if I blur it, it fits a little bit better with, for example, the sharpness of the ground, because this isn't the best filmed shot in the world, so the ship does look a little bit better with an ever so slight blur applied to it. Now, once you come to this point of your visual effects process, you might get what I call render fear. As I was doing with the light, you'll keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking everything because you're just afraid of committing and hitting render. It might be useful to take a step back from your work and maybe come back to it in a couple of hours or a couple of days if you're not in a hurry and take a look at it again. I think it's pretty good. I think it looks pretty reasonable. I think the lighting is pretty good. I think everything is looking okay. So I'm going to start doing some render tests. And what do I mean by that? If you just come over here and take a look at the ship, there is a little bit of noise going on. It's not a big deal because this is applied over a video and every single image has some degree of noise to it. So it isn't a big deal that your ship has noise. I could try to help integrate the ship a little bit better by getting rid of some of this noise. It could work. And by the way, as you can see, like, these do make a difference when it comes to integrating the ship into the environment. But if the ship already looks good, they're gonna work better. We need to balance the quality. If you look over here at our render, you'll notice that our ship is a bit noisy in some places, But again, and please remember to always use view transform standard, okay? Don't use filmic because that's gonna blur everything. Use standard because that's gonna retain the details from your video. Your video wasn't captured in a super high dynamic range format. What I'm going to do is, if you take a look over here, this render took 46 seconds with everything, just computing the shader, everything. It took about 46 seconds. What I want to see is, can I get away with maybe a little bit less resolution? So I'm going to try to render at 85 samples and just see what happens. I am basically computing the loss in quality that I'm going to have against the speed that I am gaining. Again, that rendered at 32 seconds, and if I compare it to this, I don't really see much of a difference. Let me take a look here. I don't really see much of a difference, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Turn on adaptive sampling if you have that option over here. If you don't, use the newest version of Blender, because adaptive sampling, again, I'm gonna do another comparison with adaptive sampling enabled, and let's see how fast that goes. Yeah, that rendered 10 seconds faster, and that might not feel like much, but we do have our here a scene with 171 frames. So if every frame is rendering in about 20 seconds, that is 3000 for 20 seconds, which divided by 60, that's about an hour. If instead of that we had everything rendering at 30 seconds per frame, that would be a render speed of about 1.5 hours. So I'm essentially saving ourselves half an hour of waiting around for this shot to complete by doing that. Now, very important thing before you hit render, everything that's coming into the viewer node needs to come into the composite node, and you gotta pick your output file format. It is really tempting to come over here and choose FFmpeg video, because in the end of the day, we are going to transform this from an image sequence into a video file, so why not just use a video file? Well, the reason for that is, if Blender crashes midway through your render and you're rendering to a video file, you lose all of your progress. This looks a bit too dark. I'm just gonna change it around a bit, just maybe get it more like this, maybe. Yeah, this looks nicer. Just doing a very mild adjustment. I might go a bit more extreme here. I'm just doing a final tweak on my color correction. Hey everyone, so Pedro from the future here to remind you, don't be Mr. Hasty like I was, because I forgot to press this one button right here on my rendering. So if I come over to sampling over here and I come over to advanced, I gotta turn on my use animated seed button. So what that's gonna do is, for each frame of the video, the noise pattern is going to look ever so slightly different in my render, and that is going to help integrate my 3D into my 2D a little bit better, because if the noise looks exactly the same, it can be a little bit fake. This is going to make our render look a little bit better in the end, so that's what I'm gonna go for. Don't be like me, don't be Mr. Hasty, have a little more patience. I was talking about how you should often just go for it, because you do get insecure, but do make sure to double check your render settings. It might be useful to take a step back from your work and maybe come back to it in a couple of hours. It is a weird situation because you do need to be very precise in order not to make dumb mistakes like the one I made, but also you do need to control your insecurity in a way that it doesn't prevent you from doing what you do, because there is a tendency to never having your work finished because you're never 100% satisfied with how things are. A good example of that would be these tutorials that I'm making. Of course, I am not 100% pleased with them, but they are my first tutorial series in English, actually, which is not my first language, which is something else. I'm always sort of self-conscious about pronunciation, all of that. It is very important that you leave that behind, but maybe don't rush into rendering. So I'm going to come back to Blender over here. I'm going to choose a new render folder. I'm just going to call it render_1. I'm going to name the file spaceship_v2, which means version 2. I always like to put an underscore next to the file name because that separates the file name from the frame number, which Blender is going to automatically add in here. If I don't have that, the frame 00000 is going to be frame v2 whilst if I do that, it's going to be v2_00000, which I find a little bit better. So I'm just going to hit accept. I'm going to save up real quick and Control F12 to render everything again. Whilst that loads, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to come right back once rendering's finished. And we might actually compare both results with and without the use animated sample tool, just first to see if there's going to be such a noticeable difference with them. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't make your render times longer. So there's really no reason for you not to have that turned on. But again, the reason why I leave these things in my tutorial, you might have noticed I have a couple of moments in my tutorials where I make a mistake or I decide to use a different node or I decide to do something different. I could re-record all of that, but the reason I don't is because this is how doing something like that in the real world actually feels like. It's not a straightforward process. It's not a process that you're ever 100% pleased. It's not you don't always know everything going into the work, and part of the fun of it actually is figuring out, but sometimes it is discouraging. You might notice that sometimes I get a little bummed out, but then things get working and I get excited again. This is how you're going to feel doing something like that. Don't let that discourage you, because it is a gradual process. You will be able to gradually make more and more complicated effects and scenes and use more and more complicated techniques. I am training on a couple of things so that I can bring to this channel on a couple of future tutorials. I won't talk about that right now, but you will eventually get better and better and better as time goes on. See you guys when this finishes rendering and I can compare results. All right, everyone, we're back here and it's just finished rendering. I'm gonna take a look now at both how the render looks now. This is the new render, Spaceship version 2, and it looks pretty good. You can see a lot of the noise I was talking about right over here, but I don't think it's too extreme. It doesn't bother me that much. But if you compare to my first render that I made, you'll notice that it kind of looks like the noise is stuck in one place and the footage is moving. And that is because the noise isn't randomly generated like it is over here. So this is basically the reason why I re-rendered, and I did it with the animated seed option turned on. And this is how you would pull off an effect like that. Now, it's not the most complicated effect that you can do, but it's probably the first effect that you should do because it lays down the groundwork for more and more complicated things. Everything that you do after a point like this in terms of 3D integration is just building upon the techniques that you've learned here. So you might, for instance, do a ragdoll shot where you have a physics simulated puppet falling onto something. You might do an explosion, but then you have specific techniques that you're going to apply associated with the basic things that you've seen me do in a shot like this. All right, so this is the end of this tutorial series. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope to see you guys again on this channel. I'm going to keep making more and more stuff, so don't forget to like this video if you've liked it, and subscribe and share this tutorial with your friends. And if you do a shot like this using the techniques that I've showed you, I'd love to see them. You can send them my way. I have an Instagram account. I'm gonna start posting more and more things there. And that's it for this series. Thank you very much. Bye bye.